Hello, my name is James. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey over mainly the past 30 years or so. And I want to focus in on a few key things, and I want to tell you how God can take someone from that who has no idea what he's doing, who has no plans, and put him on a journey to where that he can end up in a good place and be successful, because God is sovereign. God knew me from the womb. He knew me in my mother's womb. He had plans for me. I didn't know those plans when I was young, but I got to experience his plans for me along the way. See, when I was young, I was insecure because I was this crippled person who no one wanted to love. See, that's what I thought, because I would have to go out of my way to try to get my peers to accept me. I would prove to them and myself that I could do things. I would cause myself physical harm so where that they would pay attention to me. You see, I have no feeling on the left side of my body, so as a result, I would do things to my arm and hand until that others would look and go, "Oh wow, that's cool, I'll pay attention to him. I like that." I couldn't see at that time that they were just using that as an excuse to have a laugh at my expense. But I learned over the years that I was worthy of something, but I still didn't know what I was worthy of. So God, in his sovereignty, guided me along the way. And the first half of my life was pretty mundane in comparison to this last half. You see, I moved from California to New Mexico, and when I did, there were some key events when I moved that allowed me to come out of my shell, to make a difference, for God to make me who he truly wanted me to be. I'm going to start with a simple thing: karaoke. You wouldn't think of karaoke as a great big deal, but you see, it allowed me to be comfortable speaking in front of others, because I got up and I sang, whether it was good, whether it was bad. Other people could judge whether they were right or wrong. It doesn't matter. You see, because I learned that it did not matter if they wanted to laugh at me or whatever, that I could get up and do that and be comfortable doing it. Whether it was a song I knew or didn't know, it didn't matter. I was just having fun getting up and experiencing that. So you see, that allowed me to get comfortable in speaking to people. And also, a little bit later, I became a math instructor at the college. It was something that I utilized because I had a computer science major and a math minor. Well, the math instructor who was teaching business math suddenly died, and they needed a new instructor. Everyone else who was there teaching at the college thought that business math was beneath them, but I was willing to step up and teach. So that gave me the experience that I had always wanted, to be able to do that. So that got me comfortable, again, speaking and planning and whatnot. So that allowed me to hone my skills further that the karaoke had started. And since I'm disabled, I use a mobility scooter. Sometimes when I'm in the house, perhaps a wheelchair or something similar. but I don't get around without assistance. At one point, it was a walker, because you see, when I was about 35, I got out of my car one day and I fell down. I decided that maybe I should start using a cane. Well, that cane wasn't working out too well for me because it was not steady enough for me with my disability. And what is my disability? Cerebral palsy. Now, that is just an umbrella term. Anyone else who has cerebral palsy might have something different that is affected. Now, so I decided I would use a walker. So I bought a walker. The walker helped, but over time, throughout the years, it became that my balance and my ability to use the walker became less and less. But for the most part, I used a walker up until recently. Now, it was also with the mobility scooter that I would use when I was alone and wanted to go places. Well, cars and people, drivers, they don't always look what they're doing or think about what they might do. So I've been hit a number of times. Now, 7 actually. It was a case where I got tired of being hit and nothing being done, and seeing what was around me in my city, how it could be improved. So I became a disability advocate. Not any paid position, but I just got tired of being hit, being literally run over by people. So I became the disability advocate. I went and I got proclamations signed for Disability Awareness Months in different places. I brought the awareness that others weren't bringing to the community. That again got me so where I could be speaking comfortably. And that also was a thing where I would go and give speeches, and I could give the speeches without having things written out because I knew what I wanted to say. I was comfortable with how I wanted to say, and it didn't matter again if people were listening or not listening, because I was comfortable enough in what I was saying, and I knew what I was saying was good and true. You see, God allowed me to have that ability to speak. He allowed me to become something more than what I thought I was. I was a timid person when I was young. I didn't want to cause issues, so I would just not say things and just deal with things. But you see, God knew that that's not what He wanted for me out of my life. So He transformed me. He took me. He shaped me. He molded me. But He didn't tell me that He was going to use little things along the way to shape me. Now, I also have Joe Grove to thank for some of my growth. You see, he came into my life and I learned how to love others because of him. There were things that I had preconceived in my mind that he was going to do, how he was going to act. I never gave him a chance. But God put that to an end. You see, He made circumstances where I had no choice but to give in to God and to get rid of my bitterness. My bitterness was only destroying me. It wasn't destroying Joe. After I got rid of my bitterness, I learned how to love him for who he was, not for who I wanted him to be. He and I had a great relationship up until his death And I took his death hard. I didn't realize I was going to take it so hard when it happened, but I did. You see, because I learned how to love him for him. God allowed me that ability. But along my journey with Joe, I also moved to Louisiana because I was going to get married, or at least so I thought. I thought, well, God wanted me to get married. He set things up, put things in motion, so where I could get married. I went out to Louisiana. I was in the state where I wanted to get married. The woman, she wanted to get married. And we were well on our way. But things happened, so where I didn't get married. But along the way, you see, I don't regret that because I learned how to love and be able to communicate more with her and with other people. I could have only had that ability through that relationship. So I don't look back at that relationship and regret it. There might be certain things that I did in that relationship that weren't the best of choices. God wasn't taken by surprise when I made those choices, but he used those choices that I made to shape me further. And while I was there in Louisiana, I ruptured my bicep. Ouch was not the word out of my mouth when I said that. But that, again, was a thing that ended up for good because I was in a situation where I needed to have the surgery done because I cannot use my left arm for anything that requires fine motor detail. So I had an MRI done of my arm. Now, MRIs aren't any fun. Now, the woman that I was with, she thought it would be a grand idea for me to also have an MRI of my brain at the same time because she was concerned because I had mentioned to her that I had a cyst. So she thought that I needed to have that looked at. So, along with my arm, I had the cyst MRI, and that came back with the result of the findings were consistent with porncephalic cyst or open schizencephaly. Now, not being familiar with those two terms, I did what any normal person would do. I took that paper with the findings, looked it up on Google to see what those were. Now, those findings with the open schizencephaly or porncephalic cyst were consistent with my outward display and things that were wrong with me with the cerebral palsy. So that had always been a lifelong question of how did it happen? How did I end up with the CP? It wasn't necessarily the why, because the why was answered at different points because God showed me that he was using me to help others along the way. I accepted that, but I still wanted to know how I got it. Because when I was born, it was just a thing that people just used a blanket reasoning of, oh, well, lack of oxygen at birth. That must be what it was. Well, I had different doctors tell me that no, it happened before birth. They knew this just by looking at me and the way that I was walking and whatnot. So I had that question of, how did it happen? Well, when I got those findings back from the MRI and had that being consistent, I had my answer. So you see, even that was a good thing that God used. So rupturing my bicep was not a fun thing, but God used that for good. He used my relationship in a way that I didn't think He would, because I went with the expectation of getting married. Well, He knew that wasn't the ultimate thing that He wanted out of it. He wanted to give me the answer to a lifelong question and to help me do other things along the way. So don't be surprised if you think that something is bad, that God turns to something good, because He can, He will. We have His promises to stand on. And after the relationship ended, I went to Colorado. I got to spend time with my father there. And so I got to spend valuable time with him, help him through things that he was going through. And if I hadn't went there when I did, he told me that at that time he was ready to give up on life. I had no idea about that. So again, my relationship ending in Louisiana, something good other than my lifelong question being answered, something else good came out of that. I was able to help my father without even knowing how much I was helping him. Now, after a couple years in Colorado, I decided that I needed to move to California. In California, I started attending Church on the Hill. That's because my friend was the pastor there, and I wanted to support him, and I wanted to be able to do things in the church. So I started doing simple things. I started with envelopes, addressing envelopes, because I wasn't a member, so there were certain things that I could not do there under their bylaws. So I was content. I was helping my friend doing some of the administrative things that I could do. But over time, I did become a member. My roles in the church grew. I was at one point the treasurer. I was also doing other things. So it was a case that I did more than I ever thought I would do. And at one point, one of the things that we concentrated on was the communication cards. The cards were blue, so we referred to them as blue cards. Now, on the blue card, people would leave any perhaps questions or comments they had, any prayer requests, praise reports, or other comments, and there were also check boxes that they could do to find out more information on certain things. But we wanted to be able to track those rather than just have the cards and then see them and throw them away. So I began tracking those. I would enter them into the database, and as I did that, I began to learn more and more about the people. I began to care more and more about the people. The people, the things that they were writing became something that impacted me greatly. And one night, I was entering the things off of the blue cards, and I could hear God urging me, saying, I want more. I want you to be a pastor. Well, I learned years ago, if God tells you something, you need to follow up on that. You see, he told me about Louisiana, that I needed to move there, although I didn't know the reason why, ultimately, what would come out of that. I did obey God with that, and I knew that I had to obey him with being the pastor. So I let my friend know that I wanted to pursue being a pastor. That required months of learning and training, and it also required for him a few months, just a time of reflection, so where I could make sure that I wanted to do it, to continue with that step, instead of pursuing other things in the church. Well, after those few months, I still wanted to pursue the pastorship, so we made out a plan, and in 2019, I was licensed. Now, it wasn't by him, because he had to step down because of physical health issues that he was having. So we had another one of my friends, who was also his brother-in-law, became the pastor. He finished up what my friend had started, and I became licensed as a pastor in 2019 on August 1st of that year. Now, so I could essentially marry and bury people and other things. Now, the difference between licensing and ordination is that licensing I would liken more to like a physician's assistant. You can do the things that a pastor can do, but you just can't have your own church, just like the physician's assistant can do the medical things, but they are under the guidance and tutelage of an actual physician. In the same way, that was the case with me. I could do those things, but I was basically under his tutelage. So that required a 2-year time before I could be ordained as a pastor. And so that happened in 2021, and unfortunately, neither my father nor Joe were able to attend the ordination because Joe had died in March of 2020, and my dad in January of 2021. So neither of them got to see my ordination, but both of them, I know, were proud that I was going down this road to being the pastor. They could see the goal that I had and how I was pursuing it. So they knew that it was something that God was doing. Now, I had plans to go and do an interview with my father, but unfortunately COVID made that so where that wasn't going to happen. And he died before we could actually have the opportunity to do that. But I know that he was really glad that I chose the role of pastorship. Being a pastor You have good things and bad things in your life that happen. You see the highs, you see the lows, but you never stop caring. You want the best for people. You see, and without all of these other things in my life that God was doing for decades, I couldn't have been pastor. You see, I wouldn't have been able to get in front of people and talk or preach, give any message, give any lesson with the security of knowing that I was doing it right and I was making a difference. You see, I wouldn't have been able to go up and talk to people and find out about their needs, their concerns, their desires. I wouldn't have been able to relate to some of those people. I wouldn't have been able to love them despite that they maybe weren't always deserving of love. You see, I learned these things. I learned how to do things. I learned that I could make a difference because of the things that God showed me over the course of 30 years, roughly. Well, that's where I am now, except I gave the I gave my life to God, and he had one request of me in March of this year. He wanted me to leave the church that I was comfortable with, the people that I learned to love. He wanted me to leave that situation so that he could continue my journey. So now I'm on another part of the journey where I don't know exactly where it will end up, what I'll be doing. But I do know that I listened to God, and it's not taking him by surprise. So I would like you to know that God is sovereign. He is in control of things when we are not. He has our days planned out, known what will happen. Does that mean that we don't have free will? No, God gives us free will, and that's a complicated thing of how free will works. But he uses our choices, but he knows what our choices will be, because to him, he's like saying, duh, I knew you would do that. Even though he's given us a choice, do A or B. Well, he knows which one we will do, because he knows us that well. He knows every little thing about us. He wants the best for us. He will take you on a journey if you allow him to take you on a journey.
Unknown caller.
That journey can be the best part of your life. Allow God to take you on a journey. Allow God to use you how he wants to use you. Be what God wants you to be. I did.